Hi, this is Steve from PixelBump.com. Welcome to our new tutorial on creating fire effects with FumeFX. In the past, we've done a number of effects using FumeFX for smoke, but today we're going to do fire. And my man Beavis said it best.
Fire! 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 Fire!
So the effect we're going to recreate today is the same one that I did for Jeff Lewis's video Noah, where he talks to the burning bush. And let's take a look at the shot. You can see we've got a burning bush right up into frame, and it's going to be really hard to find any stock elements that are really going to kind of fit the shape and match the amount of turbulence and wind that's in this shot. If we look at the shot on its own, you can see that Jeff's beard's blowing, this bush is blowing, that tree is blowing. Most of the stock fire effects you're going to find are going to be a little more calm, so it's going to be really hard to cobble something like this together out of stock footage. But that's all right. We've got FumeFX and we've got Maya, and let's dig in. So I'm going to switch over to Maya here, and I've got my scene set up with a camera with an image plane so I can see exactly where to place my geometry. And the first thing we need to do is build ourselves a little structure that can kind of match the shape of this bush. So I'm just going to come in, create a cube, and I'm just going to draw it out here. There we go. And I'm just going to start shaping a little bit. And I'll jump over to my vertex mode, and I'm going to bring these top guys up, and I'm going to switch over to my faces, and I'm going to start extruding. I'm going to switch to my polygon menu, and I'm going to, there it is, extrude. I'm just going to pull this up a little bit and maybe shrink it in, and then I'll go ahead, repeat that for this little piece over here. I'll go ahead, shrink that in even more, and then I'll start grabbing some faces along the side here. There we go. And I'll extrude this guy out a little bit. Shrink it down. We bring it back. I'm just trying to roughly get the same shape. Doesn't need to be too fancy. And let's come over here and we'll extrude out this piece, and I'll squish it down about like that. And I'll extrude out here, and again just kind of squish it down. There we go. That's a rough structure that kind of follows that shape enough for our purposes. You can go ahead and do anything more advanced. If you want to follow the leaves a lot closer, you definitely can. But this little rough shape is all I'm going to need. So now that we've got our geometry placed, let's go ahead and create a FumeFX volume. And you can see it's definitely a bit larger than I'm going to need. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring it in. And I'm going to want to go ahead and bring its spacing down right away, just so that we can have enough resolution to start with. And we'll say our end frame 200, that's fine. I'm going to turn on always display, and I'm going to come down, change my maximum iterations. Everything else here looks pretty good. I might turn up my time scale a little bit. Since it's fire, we want it to move quickly. And This looks pretty good. We're going to want a lot of turbulence. Like we saw, there was a lot of wind rustling around, so we're going to need a fairly high turbulence. But I do want to have a fair amount of detail in it. So I'm going to definitely turn my detail up in my turbulence noise. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to drop my ignition temperature because I want it to burn really fast. And I'm going to go ahead and drop my burn rate down a little bit. And I'm going to leave Fire Create Smoke off. I actually don't want any smoke in this one. And we'll start with our temperature buoyancy there. We may want to push it up a little bit later. And I'll come down here and I'll turn on wavelet turbulence just in case we need it. And I think that's pretty good to start there. So I'm going to go ahead, select my geometry, and I'm going to select a P-cube source, or I'm going to create a object source, and I'm just going to make my icon much smaller. And I'll leave my fuel at 100, my temperature at 300, and I'm just going to disable smoke. So when I come back to Fume, I'm just going to make sure that my source has been added in. And I'm going to go ahead and save my project. And I think we're pretty good to give this a first run and just see what we've got. So I'm going to go ahead and hit simulate, and we'll just see what happens. All right, so I'm going to turn my viewport update to 1 here, and I'm going to come back down to my fuel, and I might want to turn up that burn rate again. I think I might have been premature. There we go. That's a little more reasonable. Well, it's still giving us really high fire that's breaking the frame, which isn't necessarily what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and turn up the burn rate a little more, and we'll start again. And that's looking better. That's looking more reasonably like what I would like to see. I'm going to go ahead and stop it, and I'm going to come down to my render settings. And I'm going to turn off smoke out of there. And I'm just going to give it a simple gradient for now. Just something so we have a little bit of color coming in. And we won't know really about opacity until we start rendering this. So I'm going to leave that alone. But I am going to come in here and I'm going to turn up or reduce my spacing so that I will have a larger grid size. So I'm going from 150 units to 400 here, which is going to give us a lot more resolution. But I'm also going to come in and turn my reduce up a little bit, just because I want to keep it a little easier for the viewport to handle. So let's go ahead, run that again. And we'll come back in a minute and see what we got. All right, so I'm going to stop at 12 frames in here, and I'm going to open up my renderer and see kind of what things are looking like so far. All right, so I think we can see here the first thing that we got to do is hide the geometry, because we got this big shape here which is really interfering with our view. But you can see it does look a little thin. So I'm going to go ahead and come down to my fire, and I'm going to go ahead and double the opacity on it. And let's go ahead and take another preview and see how that's looking. All right, that's looking pretty good. The only thing I don't like is that over here, since we didn't put any geometry, we're obviously not getting any fire. And I really do like how where the geometry follows the shape of the bush, we're getting a really nice convincing look. So I'm going to go ahead, back up here. I'm going to turn my geometry back on. And I'm going to switch over to faces mode here. And I'm going to look at it in perspective so I can grab that face. That's the one I want. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to do another extrude here. And I'm going to go ahead and shrink it down a bit like that. And then I will go ahead and extrude it one more time. And shrink it just so I can cover up these last little bits of leaf here. And that should give us a nice fuller look to our fire. All right, so with that added, I think I'm gonna go ahead and turn up my spacing a bit more because I'm liking what I'm seeing here, but I really do want to see what we've got. So I'm going to take it up to more of a production level, maybe around 600 units per, so 610. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and simulate again. And we'll bring this right on back as soon as we have some results to look at. All right, so we're back. We're 10 frames in, or 11 frames. Let's go ahead and take another render. Oops. I'm gonna go ahead and kill that because I just noticed my geometry is back on again. So I definitely want to turn that off before I do this render. There's a nice little detail here. I can see a lot of good movement in the direction of the fire. So we got licks pointing in different directions, so we can tell we got a lot of turbulence. We'll need to do a play blast to see if the amount of turbulence is good in animation, but we're definitely seeing the effects of it in the render itself. So I'm going to go ahead, preview out a number of frames just to check the animation. So I'm going to go ahead and continue my simulation, and we'll come back maybe about a second in once it hits 24 frames, just so we can see how it's playing. All right, so we're back, and I'm going to go ahead and drop my frame range down to 24, and I'm going to go ahead and do a play blast. That feels pretty good. I think I'm going to go ahead and turn up or turn down my reduce, maybe to a 2:1, just so I can see it a little clearer. Yeah, that definitely is going to be a little more indicative of what's happening here. But yeah, that there, you can see the amount of turbulence that's happening. Definitely a nice high amount. Definitely what we want. Definitely. All right. So the only thing I don't like that's left here is that it's just really even over the course of this whole thing. And the way I'm going to solve that, so I'm going to come into my Hypershade, and I'm going to create just a new Lambert shader here, and in the color I'm going to plug in a little noise. There we go. And for the time being, I'll turn off Fume. I'm going to turn my cube back on, and I'm going to switch over to viewport 2.0. And then with my cube selected, I'll go ahead and assign the material. And when I hit 6, I should now see my noise pattern showing up on the cube. But we've got a lot of crazy stretching going on right now. So I'm going to come over to my polygon menu and come down to my UVs and, come over to my create UVs, and I'm going to go ahead and just do an automatic mapping. And there we go. Now we have a lot better distribution of our noise. And so I'm going to come over to my noise and I'm going to tweak it a little bit. I just want to get some higher contrast happening. And let's see here. There we go. Something like that. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new expression on the time. And I'm just going to have it be equal to time times 4. And I'll hit create. And that'll just keep that texture moving around. You can see it really nicely moving around there. So I'm going to come back to my regular viewport. So I'll be able to see my FumeFX. And I'll go ahead and hide the geometry again. But I'm going to come over to my P-Cube source here. And under Fuel, I'm going to set it to intensity. And the intensity I want to set it to is to that same Lambert. So now everything that's happening on that cube is going to drive the amount of fuel that's coming out. So we should get a very different looking fire with a little more breakup in it. Hopefully a little more interest in it. So I'm going to come up here, and for time's sake, I'll go ahead and bring this back up something like 2. And we'll go ahead, or maybe 1.7? Yeah, somewhere around there. And we'll go ahead and preview this again, cache out some frames. Let's try plugging the noise directly in. Maybe I hooked that up incorrectly. And that would be it. So I hooked that up incorrectly. So let's go ahead and stop that again real quick. I want to come into my noise. Let's bring that back down. There we go. And hopefully we'll see a little more breakup along the surface. I'm not really seeing a ton of what I want to see yet, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go ahead and change the frequency of my noise, make it a lot bigger, just so we can get a little more breakup over the course of it. There, I think I'm starting to see, oh, maybe that was, let's come down here to our to our render settings. Let's turn that opacity back down a bit. There we go. Now we're starting to see more of that breakup again. So if I go ahead and take a render, we should be looking fairly close to what we want to see. Much better. You can see there's a little more breakup. It's not as heavy over the course of the whole thing. I think I might have gone a little too large with the noise. So instead of 2, let's try maybe 4.5 there. And we'll go ahead, give it one more simulation. But there we go. Now we're starting to see it even in the preview, how it's not burning evenly over the course of the entire thing, which is exactly what I was going for. me stop it there. I'm going to back up a couple frames. And let's go ahead and take another render, see how it looks. Now, aside from it being a little low resolution, I like this a lot. The big thing I'd like to do before we do the final simulation and renders, I'd like to come in and just play with this color bar here a little more. Just kind of add a few more colors in. Maybe bring in a darker reddish orange here. Maybe not quite that dark. And just start bringing in some of these other colors. Just to make it a little more visually interesting. There we go. That's looking much better. Let's go ahead and turn off our back image plane so we can just see the fire on its own. And you can definitely see we're just too low res here, and maybe our shape is a little too simple because we're definitely seeing that long curve here. So maybe go and break this up a little more. And other than that, I think it's pretty good to go. So breaking up the shape a little bit and upping the resolution again, and I think we're going to be there. So I'm going to go ahead. Simulate back out a few high-res frames just for one last look. And if we're good there, we'll finish the simulation, render it out, and get it over to After Effects for the composite. All right, so here we are back with our simulation. When I saw the high res, I noticed that we were just not getting enough distance away, so I turned the burn rate down a little bit again, just so that the flame could live a little longer. And let's go ahead and take a look at another render. And now we're starting to definitely get a lot of nicer, higher licks. And I think that the burn rate could probably even turn down a little bit more. So I'm going to say 40 on that, and let's go ahead, make sure our opacity is where we want it to be. Heck, let's go ahead and bring that burn rate down just a little bit more. We can always go back the other way. So let's just go ahead and take a look at this simulation as it starts to build, because we'll get a good idea in our viewport what we're dealing with. We have our reduce only at half, so this is going to be pretty close to the shape of the flames. And let's pull open our previous render and save it, and then we'll go ahead and do the new render so we can just A/B this a little better, see if we are where we want to be yet. That's looking much better to me. Yeah, we're starting to lose. We're starting to cover up the shape a little bit better again, because now we're starting to get larger licks off of the shape. So I think this is looking pretty good. Again, like I said, if I were redoing this, I'd go back, carve up this geometry a little bit more. But I think that the look of the fire is definitely what I want now. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and then I'm going to jump over to After Effects here, and I'm going to pull in my original render, which I did, and we're going to talk a little bit about compositing this. So as you can see, this one, when it comes in, it's a little dull, and it's a little little too transparent. So I'm going to grab a quick curves adjustment here, and I'm going to drop it onto my fire, and I'm going to boost up that alpha a bit, just until we get a nice looking flame there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my footage, and I'm going to screen it over the top of itself. And as you can see, it just helps us get a lot brighter in our flames, a little hotter feeling. But what I also would like to do is take a hue saturation and put it over the lower layer. And then I'm going to come into my reds, and I'm going to shift those over a little bit, and maybe just desaturate them a little bit. And then what I'll do is take a little bit of glow, put it over the top, and we'll go ahead, bring out the glow radius, maybe bring down the threshold just until it feels pretty good. And I think I will grab a little motion blur for this. So I'll grab my pixel motion blur and I'll put it at the top of my chain so that it won't mess up the effects below it. And let's go ahead and preview this. And I think maybe that glow is a little too hot. So I'll come down here, maybe bring down the intensity a little bit, bring out the radius a little bit. And as you can see here, I did break up the shape a little more when I did this version than the one I just showed you. So take the time, do the geometry right. And that's pretty good. The only thing I really don't like is it's just too saturated at the moment. So I'm going to drop a hue saturation on the top as well. And I'm just going to bring it down just because I want to match it to the shot a little better. I'll come over to my master saturation here for both of these and just kind of knock it in a little better. And that's something you always want to kind of pay attention to as you are adding your visual effects to a shot, is not just what looks best for that exact effect, but what's matching a plate if you have it. Because you may be passing this off to a colorist and they're going to try to grade the shot as a whole, and the closer your colors are to the colors in the frame, the better off your effect will be in the final result. And there we go. That's looking pretty darn good. So I think that's about where we're going to leave this one. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you've learned something that you can use in your work. If you have any questions, you can always hit me up on Twitter or Facebook or in Google Plus or in the comments. And if you want to keep learning, we have more great tutorials and assets for you to use in your work over at pixelbump.com. Thank you so much for watching. Go and create.